Hello. Welcome to the In Love with Business podcast. This miniseries is titled Chief Sustainability Heroes and is hosted by Professor Paolo Melina and Melina Shore from University College London, School of Management. Throughout this series, we will talk to sustainability leaders from different organizations and sectors to learn about their sustainability journeys. We will ask them about their career paths, the challenges they encountered in implementing complex strategies of sustainable transformation, and what inspired them along the way. We will also ask what advice they would offer to aspiring chief sustainability officers. Enjoy the episode.
Today we are joined by Lewis Richards, Chief Sustainability Officer at Microsoft UK. Lewis has over 20 years of experience working in digital innovation, transformation, and sustainability. He joined Microsoft UK in 2020, working as a technology strategist, and he stepped into the role of Chief Sustainability Officer in April 2024. In his role as a CSO at Microsoft UK, he's focused on bringing together industry stakeholders and technology solutions that are important to address the pressing issues related to sustainability, efficiency, and quality. Before Microsoft, Lewis was the Chief Digital Officer at Italian Cerberus, and he also had the roles of Head of 21st Century Human Practice, very interesting job title, at Leading Edge Forum and Global Portfolio Director at CSC. And I know Lewis is very passionate about empowering people and organizations to use technology for good. So we are very happy to have you on our show, Lewis. Thank you for your time and availability.
Thank you.
So, Lewis, I guess me and Melina would like to, hear a little bit more about your background and your path of how you became a chief sustainability officer.
Well, I suppose if I go right the way back, it's all down to my mum, I suppose. I've had a career of 25 years plus in IT, basically, but that's not what I trained to do. My degree was in biology and sports science, and I was a trained rugby coach, and I was coaching when rugby turned professionalism in South Wales. And living in a little village outside Llanelli, and I got home one evening on a Thursday covered in mud, and there was a letter for me, and I opened it up, and it said, "Thank you for applying to be a graduate trainee programmer. Can you come to London for an aptitude test with 800 other graduates?" And I was like, "The hell is this?" And my mum walked past, and she said, "Oh, I saw that in the Times and sent your CV in," and just kind of walked off. And then, about 9 months and 3 interviews later, I got a job in IT, and I've been in IT ever since, really. But yeah. I have no idea what I would be doing. I wouldn't be doing this job if my mum hadn't applied for that initial one for me, really. But I've been very lucky and very fortunate to kind of have the career path I have to get to where I am now, I suppose. But it's all down to my mum, really.
That's amazing. She was very forward thinking, it sounds like.
No, not really. She thought it actually said graduate training program, and it turned out it said graduate training programmer. But so she'd misread it anyway. But there we go.
Turned out well.
Yeah, but at a certain point, you kind of switched from job titles that were digital focused to sustainability. So why that happened? How that happened?
Well, when I joined Microsoft during the pandemic. Basically. So, and I was in Microsoft. I joined as the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer for the UK water industry. So I got to basically be the technologist or the sensing function for all of our UK water clients, basically, who were going through 5 years ago. We're just about to start the next AMP funding cycle. Has just started actually in the water industry. They run these 5-year funding cycles. So I joined really at the process of the last one, AMP7. So and the task there was helping them to transform their businesses to use, from moving from quite like on premises to the cloud basically. And lots of the stuff that we do in Microsoft is very technology focused. Obviously, we provide platform capabilities to businesses, this kind of stuff. So, but I'm always looking for the way to have conversations and engage with people, really. And I think when I came into UK Water, one of the first things I always do, I always look around wherever I work, whatever industry. I'm always fascinated to find out the kind of the oblique areas, the edges of the areas of the conversation outside of probably the primary area we talk, so I can make friends and find out how I can help people, really. And in water, obviously there's a huge sustainability aspect because there's a huge environmental aspect to it, put it like that, then, really, and that kind of lends itself to my biology background to a certain degree. I'm by no means an accomplished biologist, but I understand the science, if that makes sense, and I like the science as well. So it allowed me to basically, I used that as a way of trying to find things outside the normal digital transformation type of work. The run stuff you're going to do anyway to transform. I was looking for things I could try and find which had more benefit for the customers, for individual customers, but also the UK water industry is quite unique because it's non-competitive to a certain degree. So because they are kind of, they don't, you can't change your water company, for instance. It's not, you have to be, if you're a customer, you're a customer. Which means that at an industry level, there's an opportunity to do a lot more together. So there's an opportunity to do lots more, and environmental stuff is really huge in water because, well, and it's why most people don't realise where water comes from in the UK. They've got no idea. The general populace have no idea because we turn taps on, commodity, and water comes out. So nobody appreciates the fact that you drink water. You turn the tap on in the UK and water comes out, and B, you can drink it and it doesn't kill you. I mean, that's not the situation in huge swathes of the world. We're very lucky to have that. There's a lot of problems in the industry, but those things are. The industry is full of very, very passionate people who care a lot about what they do. But the environmental aspect of it was huge because obviously all of our water comes from, boreholes. It comes from the land, it comes from rivers, this kind of stuff. And obviously there's been a zeitgeist jump in the UK in terms of people thinking about pollution and events. And lots of these things are very, very relative to water companies, that kind of stuff. But like everything where you go through, there's no one simple thing. There's no one simple place you can point a finger and go, it's your fault. It's an ecosystem of things. Agriculture's involved, heavy industry involved, manufacturing. You can't run data centers without water. And, the water that we go into all of those systems, it's not a separate water system. It's the same potable drinking water that we all use every day. So I used I got more and more involved, I suppose, from the sustainability aspect of that, or the environmentalist back, and we used that to kind of come up with some groundbreaking projects and stuff that we did there. And during that time, I got close to working with our previous chief sustainability officer, an amazing lady called Musadora Jorgensen, who was the UK's before me, basically. And we used to kind of tag team at events. So sometimes I would go and talk at events like done at the Eden Project and stuff if Muzzy couldn't go and do those kind of things, really. So I kind of just evolved into it. And then when Muzzy got a new job and left, I phoned her up and said, if you want me to carry on picking some of the slack up for some of the speaking events, let me know. You let whoever is going to be doing your job know, and I'm quite happy to support. And and it went from there, basically. I never considered about applying for the job, in that makes sense. But then I thought to myself, well, if I don't do it, someone else will do it, and then I'll just be in love permanently because someone else will be doing the job. And I thought to myself, I should have probably had a go at doing that myself. So I've been doing it for about a year now, I suppose, or nearly a year.
Right.
Excellent.
It's great.
And let me ask you something, because I guess many of the guests we had in the show, have been in this sustainability path for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe a question that is appropriate is, having been in this role just for a year, what are the key takeaways? 12 months later, is in terms of the idea you had of the role, the type of objectives that you set years ago, the type of stakeholder interactions, I guess, what you saw coming and what you didn't see coming.
It's an interesting question, really. I suppose the difference is getting the role I've got as well. I got the role I've got, but I also work for Microsoft. And I suppose the timing of me getting the role really coincided with the exact same time that our environmental report from 2024 came out for the 2023 numbers. And just about the same time really that ChatGPT hit the market in a large way from OpenAI. So there's like a conflagration, I think, of news and information and thought and an entire press narrative that's really kicked off around AI as is loosely used at the moment, and sustainability at the same time. So it was interesting time to take that job on, I think, to be honest. That's one facet I thought was quite interesting. I think the other thing that I've got up to speed with really, and I think it's looking at there's a shift happening, I think, especially in the UK, between this idea of voluntary reporting to becoming sort of legislative reporting. And I think my EMEA colleagues, because there's a number of chief sustainability officers in my team for each region. My EMEA colleagues are probably, where CSRD is in place, they're a bit further along, I suppose, sometimes with some of the corporations, where it's something that UK companies do it because it's a nice to have. But, where there's regulatory import, things have moved slightly differently that way. So I think there's a shift happening, I think, in terms of where the importance of who owns that work sits with inside organizations as well. I think there's a shift I'm starting to see from maybe chief sustainability officers and individual sustainability teams that maybe that have nothing to do with IT necessarily, or the CFO. They're just in the business, in strategy and transformation somewhere. And they've been doing stuff really well for the last couple of years, pulling data together and stuff like that. But they've been left to their own devices to a certain degree. People have been able to go credit card shopping for products, for reporting. There's that kind of thing. I think there's a shift happening where it's becoming, the penny's starting to drop, that this information is going to be commercially and competitively important. And that's having a little bit of a shift about who's responsible for what. It's making people, I think. The other thing I found with it, I think when you go and talk to businesses, I think lots of people look at sustainability and you ask inside the business units, and everybody's really quite proud of whatever their company's sustainability strategy is, but it's always somebody else is doing it for them. Somebody else's job is to do sustainability. And I think the thing that I've found is what we're trying to do and help people is that everybody's got skin in that game, because and I think that's the shift thing we're seeing a little bit. I'm starting to see a bit as well. I worry a little bit sometimes that we're led by the regulatory reporting. The work happens because of people are starting at what the output template is and then working backwards. And we're creating cottage industries of people whose sole existence is just to do reports and pull data together. And you have to have transformation projects that are, well, okay, but that's all retrospective. What are you actually doing as business units as a whole to collectively get to your 2030 goal or your 2040 goal and stuff? And I think that's the interesting bit. And I think the other thing I think I've seen, and it's only my opinion of this as well, is, and I'm coming at it, as a fairly new person to this as well, is I'm reading up and following the history of the whole thing, is I think my perspective is that probably past the COP in Paris, where everybody came out of the COP in Paris in 19, and basically every man and his dog created a sustainability strategy and rushed and raced to get those things validated by SBTI or CDP and stuff like that. Everybody did the same thing. And I think everybody's realised quite how hard Scope 3 is and this kind of stuff. And then you're starting to see, I've just done my Cambridge, the Cecil Sustainability Leaders course, and I thought I'd do that, as a learning thing to bring myself up more to speed. It seems to be like a badge of honour in the sustainability space. That's the kind of course to go and do. But all the course material and the examples in there of what good looks like, Unilever and people like that. And, if you look at some of the businesses and stuff like that, I mean, I think in the press, just as an outsider looking at it, the kind of stuff, the poster childs for what good corporate practice looks like, even those companies have had a certain amount of resetting, or, language has changed, CEOs have changed, that kind of stuff as well, I think. So I think we're getting down to the hard yards element of it now, people are realising, we can't handle this by spreadsheets, and we can't just let these teams on their own do this. It's not going to be enough. But then it becomes the thing. It becomes something, and if we have to ramp up and do more work with it, it's going to cost more. And it becomes into that commercial element of like, well, what's, if we're spending money on this, what's the benefit for doing it? So it's that kind of balance, I think, is seen. So I think coming to it when I did was probably not a bad thing necessarily, because I don't think I've come necessarily with, not baggage is the wrong word, but I haven't come with a preconceived or a pattern of work for that kind of thing. I've been able to look at it from bits. And then you get into that kind of, it's a roll your sleeves up situation. It's like, well, we are where we are. We're not doing it fast enough. We're not doing it well enough. What the hell are we all going to do together to collectively make it better? And, there's no pussyfooting around it. We've got to get to work. So it feels like a good time to get involved in that, I think, at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. And Liz, you talked about how the field has shifted, even just in the time that you've been within the role. So based on your experience, how would you describe, and for our listeners who are relatively new to the field as well, how would you describe or define the role of Chief Sustainability Officer? And given how multidimensional it is with, there's the environmental aspect, the social, the economic, governance. So how do you define the role?
I think for me, well, and again, I think it comes down. I mean, this is my perspective again of what I think the role is to do as well. So I was very lucky in Microsoft when I joined to have a role. They call it an account technology strategist, an ATS role, right? But like a CTO role, we call it externally, that kind of stuff. But really, that job, from a Microsoft perspective, you're a sensing engine. And what we do, the job of that is a sensing engine. You're there to basically translate and synthesize everything that goes on across a domain, across a space, and translate that and try and make it relative and explain it to people inside the businesses or inside your units what they are, about what the impact of that will look like. And also then to spot those oblique opportunities adjacent to those things to say, well, do you realize this? Do you realize that? So the job set, I think, is one of the best jobs you can get in Microsoft personally. It's a fantastic job. And I've taken the same 5-year approach I did when I was an ATS, to basically brought that to be in the CSO. So my take on being the Chief Sustainability Officer is the same thing. I'm there to be a thorn in people's sides. I'm there to not people get off the hook. I'm there to get people to take it seriously, that kind of stuff. I think, a lot of that has to be baked into explaining people where we are and what the ramifications are. But more and more, I think it's about painting people a heads up ecosystem picture of what it actually means to counter, at the moment, a very, very, everything is done in binary blinkers on, pointing at one issue. Doesn't matter what you look in society at the moment, everything is binary. It's black or white. There's no grey. There's no nuance. Politics, religion, science, whatever you look at, it's right or wrong. It's left or right. We've lost all kind of sensible grey area in the middle. And I think the sustainability, it's very easy to point at one element of it and go, everybody's looking at who's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. I'm going to point at the one bad guy or the one bad thing. And none of this gets solved unless you look at the ecosystem and you look for an end-to-end life cycle approach. So I think part of the job of the Chief Sustainability Officer is to really have a handle on what does that ecosystem look like for us or for me or for my business, and be able to articulate that in such a way that you can bring the parts of the business together and the stakeholders and the companies and supply chain to say, look, this is how you fit into. That's what the path looks now, but the path has got to change. It's got to look like this. So how are we going to do that? But unless you can paint that picture, I equate it to work I used to do in my old job, where it's like, I think you have to teach people imagination skills. People have got to be able to hold in their head the concepts or the data, the technology, the platforms, the science, whatever it is. If you can't conceptually hold that in your head and paint a mental picture of what that is, I think you're going to be very, very hard for you to kind of lead teams, drive action, turn it into, how do you translate that back to, ROI or business process? So I think that idea of teaching imagination skills to people is probably a key thing that sustainability officers should be doing. And in its narratives, it's storytelling really, but it's around that most important of subjects as well, and getting people to care about it, I think.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It goes beyond the numbers, right? It helps them visualize. Sorry. Yeah. So when you're working with stakeholders and companies and helping them navigate and imagine their ecosystems, what are some of the biggest challenges you're seeing companies face? And then related to that, what are some of the biggest challenges your industry is facing when it comes to sustainability?
I think if you look across the planet, in every aspect, the biggest challenge we have is data. Is the challenge. Now, and I'm not going to, rather than being one of the normal consultants who turns out and says like data's the new oil and data's this, I'm not saying it like that. What I mean by data, I mean is that we're profligate in the way we create data. We create too much. Half the sustainability challenge that we've got inside of our use of systems is because we create too much data. We rubbish cleaning up after ourselves as human beings, and we get this huge spread of it. And I think the challenge, when you translate that back into people pulling data together from across multiple ecosystems to be able to evidence, it's like at the moment it's a guessing game. It's like how long is a piece of string game, and it's a game of estimation. Our estimate and our numbers for this is that. but what you're trying to do is reduce the error in the amount of estimation you're doing at the moment, that kind of thing as well. And I think we live in a world where it's an arms race, and this is why I don't like the reporting element of it completely for the things, because the arms race on that side is trying to pull together stuff you've done retrospectively and pull data together to say at a point in time this is where we are, but literally in the heartbeat that is taking you to pull that or press the button on the magic button to do the report, your business has created shed loads of new data because we are just creating it left, right, and center, and we're applying it. We're using AI to create new data left, right, and center to do different bits and pieces. So we're in this kind of data space where there's almost too much data to have there. It's not a technology problem necessarily, because technology can run and infer over that, but it's where the data meets the soft, squishy biological bit, where it meets the humans. We're kind of the bit that slows some of the processes down on this, and the understanding, because people with the best tools in the world, people will want an Excel report, or they want a dashboard, and it's the kind of, it's shifting the perspective of the human element, of how fast we can process information to catch up with what we need to do to change, I think, but to actually drive effect from the data. And every industry is the same way, because there's always data applied to some process, whether it's agriculture, or you're digging oil up, or you're trying to transform to, using solar. It's all about numbers at the end of the day, and where's the data coming from? And that quality of the data, I think, is probably the key challenge we have as humans, really.
And Lewis, based on kind of the description of the role you gave us, and based on kind of these challenges that you are trying to address in the business, what would you say are the critical skills for a CSO today, and how do you develop them? How do you maintain them? What's your reflection on that?
I think it's one of those ones. I think being humble is a really good one, to be honest. In terms of doing stuff, I think there's a lot. I think titles cause problems sometimes as well. Titles are brilliant because they get you to be able to do things like this, right? They give you opportunity. But I think using titles and things like that to open the door to having conversations with everybody I'm very lucky to be able to use that to have those conversations, I think. And I think one of the skills I've always had from my sports science days back that way, my master's in sports as well, was all around coaching science and coaching discipline. And team mechanics is the key thing. And I think, like every other facet of business really it's that combination of active listening and paying attention to people, no matter where they exist on a hierarchy, and looking for the opportunity for good ideas as well. And I think that's kind of like, from a sustainability perspective, that kind of stuff I think, because it's a funny one, because I think at a grassroots level inside organizations, the younger generation, they tend to, there's a lot more care maybe, or I have a perception of caring from a younger part of the populace. It's listening to them and then giving them a conduit and access to actually infer and affect change higher up an organization, where maybe people think it's not as important, or it's not as relativistically priority for them. That or we might say it's a priority, but we don't really mean it. That kind of stuff as well. So I think the sustainability lead has that, especially with that social and governance element of it, not just the environmental aspect. I think inside an organization, if you have that framework, that kind of stuff, it's a good ability to get behind other people and make them famous. Do you know what I mean? I think that's a good skill to have. You're very lucky to have that kind of role, to be able to champion people like that, I think.
And I guess preparing for this interview, I went over the sustainability report of Microsoft, and as you would expect from a giant organization, is a very complex, comprehensive, articulated agenda that I guess you are pushing forward. Are there initiatives that you have developed, for example, as a CSO in the last year, that you are particularly proud of, or even if you were not, even if you didn't initiate these initiatives, something that is happening at Microsoft UK that you are very proud of?
I'm very proud of my invisible tin hat. And suit of armor I've got. It's a big case in point though, because I took the role on 2 weeks before that report launched. And if you look at the report, the key headline is that Microsoft 3 numbers have gone 30%, 29.1%. Scope 3 have gone the wrong direction from our baseline. No getting away from it. They're black and white numbers, and we're very transparent. We publish all that in the report. There's no pussy, we put it out there. There we go. That's the number. So within 2 weeks, I basically had to try and feel that. What am I talking about when that, from a justification, explanation point of view? Because it's a good example of those metrics where people point it and go, see, we know you're evil, you're doing the wrong thing. You know what I mean? And you have to try and explain to people, well, what does that mean? How do you contextualize that number? So I've actually found it really beneficial to have metrics like that out there, because it's allowed me to kind of, I don't wait when I come on conference calls with people and clients. I don't wait for the one person who's done a Google search that morning and found a number and is waiting to point a finger. You use it, and I lean into the conversations. Let me tell you why it's done that, this kind of stuff. So I think from a point of view, it allows us then to have that conversation about, before you ask me a question about like, oh, well, what's the impact of AI? You know, these kind of things where it's so. I try to get people to think a little bit about the context about, well, have you really thought about that question you're asking? What do you mean by AI? You're saying AI for a start, and I know you probably don't mean AI, because AI has been around since the 50s as a concept. Are you talking about machine learning or deep learning or neural networks? Or are you actually talking about generative AI, which is the current flavor of the month? And it's probably the generative AI piece at the moment, but you use they use language loosely. So people will say AI, that kind of stuff, right? And then it allows us to lean into the conversations and say, well, think about why those numbers have gone 30% the wrong way. They've gone the wrong way, that kind of thing, or 30% in that direction because of capital build. You know, there's no getting away from it at the moment. If you build things, data centers, houses, you build factories, at the moment, when you build those things, they're made out of materials. The materials they're made out of predominantly are concrete and steel, right? So there's embodied carbon in those things. You can't have a capital developed problem at the moment without doing it. But let me explain to you what Microsoft is doing to affect that supply chain, right? So, because I'll say that, you know, we're building data centers to cope with a demand for digitization from the planet, not of which AI is a part of it, but it's not the sole reason for doing it, right? We're building because there's a demand for data and digital services. There's a capital build program going on. And I describe it allows me to describe the concept of, let me talk to you about the shell, what goes into a data center, what do you build it out from, and what we're doing around that. And then I can talk about the energy and the resources of the stuff that it takes to heat and power and cool that. And then I can talk to you about the stuff that goes inside that in terms of the chips, the racks, the servers, the PDUs. And all of that happens before you even get down to what we actually do, which is software that runs on all that stuff. So there's a journey to talk about that. And I think what it allows us to do then is talk that bit about saying, like, you know, we don't build data centers ourselves. They're built for us, but they're built to our design and our specifications. So let me show you how those data centers have evolved. The latest generation data center, which we published just before Christmas, is going to use zero water for continuous cooling. Now, it's not going to use zero water because it's going to be filled up during construction. But you compare that data center design with an older data center design, which takes throughput of potable drinking through. It saves hundreds of millions of liters of water potentially across the data center estate. It reduces the WE, the water usage effectiveness, goes down. Let me tell you what we're doing about older data centers that have got air cooling systems, that kind of stuff. We're building technology that we can retrofit liquid cooling to existing racks. So it allows me to have the conversation with people then about the innovation that's happening in the space, that kind of stuff. I can reference then, like, you know, we have a $1 billion climate innovation fund that we use to invest in startups to kickstart new products, new economies. But the fact is, we've spent 750 million of that in the last 3 years, literally doing what we said we were going to do. So we've been investing in zero carbon steel companies, algal-based concrete companies. We signed an MOU with a company called Sublime in the US about 3 months ago before Christmas, basically, which is the first kind of value thing for industrial production of zero carbon concrete. Because Portland cements, 16% of CO2 emissions globally is just in concrete. You know, we just built 2 data centers in Virginia that use cross-laminated timber, so the wooden data centers rather than using precast concrete. So it allows you to have the conversation with people around a bit like, you can't just look at a number and go, that's a bad thing. You have to look at the ecosystem of things that are designed to last for 20 or 30 years. They're going to have a certain amount of baked-in carbon. They're going to use a certain amount of energy and resources, and you have to show that evolutionary pathway of what you're doing to transform a supply chain 3 or 4 steps down the line from the bit that you operate, which is software, inside the heart. You know, you have to talk about the whole thing. And it allows me to talk about, even down to the bit like that story you probably saw in the press before Christmas, where like there's lots of things about, Microsoft are turning on a nuclear power station in America, you know, this kind of stuff, you know, nuclear power. And nuclear as an energy source or not, the simple fact is we are commissioning Constellation. We're an energy company in the US. We've got large contracts, very, very capable company. We've reconditioned, return back on reactor B at 3 Mile Island, I think of that. But that's going to it's going to give the bit farms in Virginia, where there's conflagration of data centers, fossil-free energy, whether you like nuclear or not, but it's a fossil-free energy source, 20, 30 years of energy from that kind of stuff. But again, you can't just look at that in isolation, because you also have to say, well, you have to look at that in the context of that powering a wooden data center in Virginia, and the stuff that goes into it, right, the chips come from the Far East. So we've also done deals like we've done a partnership with Maersk to electrify the I-10 highway all the way from the port of Old El Paso in Texas, right the way through to Virginia, to try and speed up the electrification of heavy-duty goods vehicles to ship the stuff from the port to Virginia. And this is what I talk to people about, like this ecosystem of it. If you just look at one bit of it, you're having a conversation that's blinking. And even if you got down to a point where that one bit of it was good or bad, does it allow you to make decisions or move things forward unless you can see the bigger picture? And I think, that's kind of what we have to do, more of that.
Yeah.
And if I can ask you a follow-up question, Lewis, because, as I said, Microsoft is truly a giant corporation operating everywhere. So in the context of the agenda for the UK, which is the one you lead, how independent or autonomous you are in the decision making? How much of that agenda is actually defined centrally in the States, or actually independently designed by you?
I think, we're obviously, we're an American-owned conglomerate, but we're a global business, I think, and we're probably fairly unique, I think, because we touch so much of the world, really, in terms of end-user computing, right, without the compute as well. We do everything. Really. I think we've got a fairly early lead process in some of this generative AI stuff as well. So we have a lot of impact, I think, around the place, that kind of stuff. And I think we've got a very good culture at Microsoft. It's part of the reason I joined Microsoft, actually, funny enough, because I'm old enough to remember CEOs before Satya Nadella, that kind of stuff. And when I was in my leading edge forum job, before I joined Microsoft back in the day, we used to run study tours to America to go and see interesting companies, startups, and big ticket items. And I'll be, quite honest, like, you go back that length of time, we used to go to Amazon. We take cloud out, we wouldn't go to Microsoft because Microsoft didn't have a cloud. There wasn't a cloud. And they'll probably write books on Satya in the years to come in terms of because there's no guarantee that shifting the pattern of that super tanker to becoming where they are now as a world leader in cloud and stuff was ever going to be a success or going to happen. But so I think culturally and from a mission point of view, I think everybody gets behind. Our job is to make every person, business on the planet better, basically using the technology. So I think that's the global mission. And the thing is, it has propagated down to every single person. The challenge what we have, like in the UK, from this perspective, how do we bring that to life for our customers in the UK? And what do we do with working with across the public sector, with government, and what do we do with private sector and that kind of thing? And I think if you look today, Keir Starmer's just been on LinkedIn, literally in the last hour, doing a live webinar about talking about the AI, the new AI strategy for the UK, and not just trying to help with regulations, become an AI engine for the world. That kind of stuff. We're so closely aligned with all of those aspects across the country. And I think we're just cloud infrastructure has been classed in the UK at the end of last year as critical national infrastructure, CNN. It's the same thing as a water and a transmission network because it's so intrinsic to daily life to have this kind of infrastructure, really. So I just think our job is it's a devil's bargain, it's scale. Our job is to provide the platform piece as efficiently and as effectively and as usefully as possible, and to help customers, whether they're public or private, to use it as efficiently as effectively as possible. So the outcome that they build isn't outweighed by the cost of doing it in the first place. Because if it is, don't bother doing it. And it literally is a scale. It's the devil's bargain, basically, in terms of the two things. And I think we have freedom and leadership to do that. And I think it sounds a bit cliche to say, but the message about being customer focused and customer obsessed is true. That's what they do. People I'm very lucky to work with really, really talented people in Microsoft who genuinely care about people at the end of the day. And it's a nice place to work in that regard. Everything's got, nowhere's full of unicorns and rainbows. There's always, everything's got problems and stuff, but it's by far and away the best place I've ever worked.
It's great. And building off of that platform that you're providing customers and hoping that they'll, leverage and use, obviously, and in some of the examples you shared with us, sustainable transformation and digital transformation are so closely interconnected. You almost can't have one without the other,
Mhm.
it sounds like. So can you share with us, like, are companies leveraging, are they actually embracing technology to help advance their sustainability goals? And maybe you could share some examples of some of the ways they're doing that.
Yeah, there's lots really, to be honest. I think, if you just look at, the simple ones are efficiency and using, I think there's two things. There's people at the moment, when you look at case studies or stories, the flavor of, the exciting thing at the moment is the use of AI to help improve things, to reason over data and make spot patterns and make effective changes that humans maybe can't make. So I think there's lots of use case stories of those things being used. We've got the use of intelligent chatbot stuff with Vodafone using stuff. We've got Clearbank as a challenger banks increasing their processing, doing stuff as well. So they're kind of, you're starting to see these kind of nascent use cases, but they're only viable if you can measure the footprint of a before and after, if that makes sense. So even though you're using AI is the sexy bit at the front at the moment. That's the kind of bit that we're looking at that says, look what it does and look at the improvement it's making, right? But it's only as valuable as being able to have the systems in place underneath that is able to measure the footprint of what resources have you used to get to where you are, both from a technology point of view and a people point of view as well. That I think. So I think it's a journey. I don't think anything of these things are kind of nailed down or 100% perfect yet. But I think the evidence that you see from those things is around the effective use of technology or using things smarter. That it has a effect on the amount of energy you're using, the amount of processing you're using, giving humans higher value tasks to do. So they're not doing mundane jobs, and you're giving people more valuable work to do. This kind of stuff. There's all those elements are baked into these kind of early stage result projects that you're starting to see really from that. But I think that's the bit that you've got to focus on. You can't be blinded by doing AI magic trick stuff to just look what it can do if you don't have the ability to measure and control the impact of it as well. Do you know what I mean? You've got to be able to square that circle a little bit, I think, to be able to just to say that you're moving those things forward, really. But I think the opportunity there is that's where the wider sustainability opportunity is, though, I think. And it's rather than sustainability being a pillar on its own over here, and it's focused on somebody else's, like going back a bit about somebody else is taking, responsibility for doing it, or it's a reporting point of view. It's the opportunity to bake sustainability into everything. Because if you have that as an underlying measure or a system across every single project that you do, and you get people to care about it in terms of creating a competitive element of what you're doing and how that is actually moving your business unit or your function, not only is adding more additive value to the end users, the humans or the customers, right? So they're getting a better service, there's more fulfilling, it's faster, it's cheaper, it's whatever it is. If you can tie that, and it's also moving us towards our 2030 goals because it's been done in a way that's using less energy, less resources, that kind of stuff. That's the sweet spot, really, because I think you're doing transformative work that is provable and measurable and reportable, quite importantly, that's showing you how you are transforming. So I think that's where businesses that get that will start having an advantage, I think, because if you start to bake that, it becomes cultural and everything's lensed through. Sustainability isn't something you do as an afterthought. It is the business lens. And should be viewed through, really.
Yeah, it's embedded in the culture.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, you've spoken to many of the benefits that come with using, technologies like AI or other innovative technologies. But could you tell us a little bit about some of the risks? Are there any risks that companies need to be aware of when they are using it, whether it's, the ethical discussion around AI or things like that? But how can people make sure they're using it responsibly?
I think that's you hit the nail on the head there. We give a lot of this stuff away for free as well. Every business should have a cross-business function that's responsible for guidelines around responsible AI in terms of how you think about it, how you use it ethically, but inside your business, your stakeholders, that kind of stuff. And we do a lot of work. We have our own. We've had it for a number of years now. We make it available for everybody. It's open source. We help governments. We help private businesses to think about how they do that themselves as well. There's also then technological things you can do using the platform as well. So there's if you imagine it's like an onion skin. You have the core foundation model capability. And like in our system, for instance, others do, there are varying other tools that do the same thing, but there's layers that you build in, and those programmatic layers are where you can programmatically tell the foundation model what it can and can't do. So you're allowed to say to it in the rule set to say, if somebody asks you to do this, politely say no and tell them the reason why. If someone asks you to do this with this data, say no, that kind of stuff. So it's a combination really of technology controls alongside a responsible AI framework or a thing is no good to anybody if it's just a PDF. Because it's no good as any other policy you've got there. It has to sometimes, it ultimately has to translate then into how are you going to give people, humans, the skill set and the thinking patterns to understand what it is they're using and how they're using it. And I think that's where the risk lies as well. It's the speed at which we can upskill people. And going back to that imagination skills piece talking about, I mean, you guys are old enough, you look a lot younger than me, but if you're old enough to remember, do you remember when Dropbox and Gmail and things first launched inside businesses, inside the enterprise? People, I know it sounds stupid now, but people struggled a lot to understand the difference of when they were working on a file on their PC, a PowerPoint or a Word deck. They struggled to understand the concept of where that file was if it was in the cloud. So if it was in a OneDrive, they'd struggle to understand the difference between it being online in OneDrive working on versus being in Gmail or Dropbox. So one inside inside your security walls, one outside. People struggle with that. So one time people phone up and I can't get my email. Can you email it to my Gmail account? People struggled like hell to get that concept and hold where the file was when they were working on. And I think in the world of AI, with the training that you have to put in place for people have to really start to think. The further you get obfuscated away from the source of the data as a human, because agents and AI are doing it, the more onus it puts you on a human to develop critical thinking skills. Because the technology is going to be able to answer things for you. It's going to be able to create things for you that sound and reason and look very, very precise, write better than you'll ever be able to write that kind of stuff. Your job is to have critical thinking skills, to look at it and go, do I understand where it's come from? Do I trust the citations? Do I check the citations to a certain degree? What's my level of confidence that I can use that and take it and go do something else with it, really? So I think it is that combination of business ownership, leadership, training, and technological guardrails, really, so that we use it. And we have to do that because that technology isn't going back inside Pandora's box. It's a while.
It's here to stay.
The question becomes, we have to learn how to, as human beings, how to make sure that we use it, sensibly and safely.
Safely.
And I wanted to ask you something, Luis, and I'm conscious, we need to at some point close this conversation, but I have two more questions for you. And there was something you said at the beginning that got my attention when you said, for example, a lot of organizations today are realizing how complex it is to address the Scope 3 emissions. And I believe you are absolutely right. 2024 was probably the very first year that saw the Science-Based Targets Initiative losing companies because they started pulling out from the initiative and, I guess, changing the targets that they had set before. So my question is about the future. How optimistic you are about the future, for example, in relation to the global net zero agenda and the type of role played by business in the context of that agenda?
Yeah, I think, and I don't know if this might be a self-awareness weakness thing on my part, but I'm inherently glass half full in terms of that. I always see the positive in terms of doing stuff. I glass half full of things. I believe as humans, we have the ability, the talent, the technologies as species to probably science our way out of most problems in terms of doing things. But for me, the question is one of speed and timing and will and that kind of stuff. I'm not allowed enough to think we've peaked where we can't solve problems, right? And I think if you look at the advances that we're making in material science at the moment, through the application of AI and early NASA and quantum computing, this kind of stuff, we've made some massive progress in desalination technologies or, creating new battery components that use less lithium. The speed at which we can crunch and create things as humans is speeding. So vaguely optimistic because I think we're good at that kind of stuff. I think we can do that kind of thing, that element of it. I think going back to the bit about the problems for business and the scope 3 challenges, it comes down to culture again, I think. And it comes down to that realization and probably more ownership of the process of sustainability. So we don't get led by the nose by the fact that we have to do a report. Because I think what it leads to, bigger businesses in the middle, being managed by spreadsheets, they've got data to fill in. And if all they're doing is go into their supply chain going, you've got to give me this information, knowing full well that your smaller businesses aren't equipped, they're not capable, they're not going to give you 100%. If you just go there and it's just a demand from the centre, and you're demanding information back from it, and then you get annoyed because they're not going to give it to you, it's just, that's not a virtuous circle in terms of doing stuff. I think for me, it's got to be that realization that if you're going to close that estimation of estimations, the bigger players, the bigger business have got to commit a lot more time and effort and resources. It's more like knowledge management lifecycle. You've got to reach out there to the companies and actively incentivize and help them to change, or help them to improve, or help them to, to get this kind of information in more way. Because you can't just sit in the middle and go, give me the data. What do you mean you haven't got it? You know what I mean? Because it doesn't help anybody. It just slows down. And the entire, what I think, and it goes back to everything else. And it's always see it in the public sector as well, between regulators and private companies, where there's the thing. If the data in the middle is an antagonist, there's always friction. You see what I mean? The challenge is to get the data to become mutually beneficial to both sides. And at the moment, I still feel it's a bit, we're in that antagonistic split where the data is important. Both sides acknowledge the data is really important, but it's an antagonistic relationship at the moment, as opposed to it being more where there's mutual benefit that comes from having the data at the same time. So people are incentivized to work on it. And I think that's going to be quite a challenge to get over for people to do those kind of things, because you're going against corporate muscle memory and corporate scar tissue and inertia of this is the way procurement runs, or the supply chain runs, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of endemic. This is why I think the sustainability focus has to go into those functions to get people. And there are brilliant businesses who have amazing jobs at that. There's some fantastic ones, but there's also probably an equal number that aren't at the moment. I suppose that's the bit we've got to try and speed up, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I promise my last question. We know that this show is followed by sustainability practitioners, young people working in sustainability teams, people out there that might be dreaming to become a CSO in a large organization, to, I guess, play a role similar to yours. So what is your advice coming out to these young people entering the field, aiming for this type of career? Advice in terms of education or experiences to pursue, or focus?
I think you've got to be in a state of constant newbie, to use a technology term for me. The state of constant newbie is what you've got to do. I mean, you've got to literally learn every day, because the instant you think something is fixed, it's not. I mean, and especially in our field at the moment, there is so much to be aware of. And I think this is the bit I think I see. That's the bit you've got to fight against, I think, if you're coming into into any organization. It's not to, you've got to fight against drinking the corporate Kool-Aid of wherever it is you work, and then just regurgitating what you think your corporate strategy is. You have to have a heads up, outside in view of the world, and you've got to keep your finger on the pulse of that kind of stuff. So lots of that comes down to like how you use AI yourselves. How do you train yourself to use AI engines to filter out good stories from the noise? I'd also say like people have to, if you're interested in sustainability, you need to be looking and researching oblique industries. You need to be looking at space technology. You need to be looking at bioresources. You need to be looking at material science. If you're going to be a good sustainability professional, you have to have a wider remit. And it's that kind of, you don't have to be an expert, but you have to have enough of a digest of what's going on to be able to make the mental links. Oh, that's got important impact of this. And I think, it's easy, like it's like any other role. If you go into that role and you become a cookie cutter version of what you think everybody else is doing, I just don't think you stand out. If you can bring a bit of passion to that at the same time, and you genuinely care about what you're doing, I think that's a good combination to have. You've got to keep on learning.
Yeah, that tends to make a big difference in many contexts. the drive.
Yeah.
Luis, thank you very much for your time. It was really interesting for us to have this opportunity to interact with you and to learn more about the work of Microsoft and your perspectives. So congratulations for this journey, and we look forward to have you in the show again in the future.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this discussion, we invite you to like and share this episode on your social media. Enjoy the rest of your day.